Hello, everyone, and welcome on behalf of the Crystal Lake Historical Society Board of Directors. This program is being offered as one of a series of virtual meetings as an attempt to reach out to our membership during the COVID-19 pandemic. This presentation was first given by Diana Kenny, president of CLHS, during the City of Crystal Lake's centennial celebration in 2014. Content for the presentation was developed by Diana Kenny, the late Tom Nemchek, and architect Bryce Alt, with references from A Field Guide to American Architecture by Virginia and Lee McAllister. To keep a local flair to the presentation, content has been added to give a little history on some of the occupants or builders of the featured homes. So that was my first disclaimer. My second is that I'm not an architect. I did take architectural history and somehow passed it in college. On top of that, my son, my brother, and two nieces are all architects, so I like to pretend that I am. My apologies to our real architect members. I've served on the CLHS board for 20 years now and am fascinated by local history, so I guess I do have a few credentials. We live in a community of beautiful homes representing many styles of architecture. Some of these homes you'll recognize quickly. For those places less known, I encourage you to take a drive around town and look at them through new eyes. Many of our oldest houses still standing in Crystal Lake are classified as Greek Revival. Here's the Colonel Palmer House, home to the Crystal Lake Historical Society. Its architectural style is considered to be Greek Revival with these elements: low-pitched gabled roof, wide band of trim at table and roof line, front door surrounded by narrow side lights and transom above door, 6/6 windows. The only thing missing that is typical of Greek Revival is a front porch with columns. Another good example of Greek Revival style is Tarpley House, which is located behind St. Mary's Episcopal Church. Unlike the Colonel Palmer House, Tarpley House has a front porch supported with columns. This building was first a school, then a home, and is now part of a church. The Crystal Lake Academy was established about 1850. The children of many prominent early families attended this private school. One of them, Ira Chase, became governor of Indiana. In 1855, the Free School Act became law, and education was provided to all, not just the rich. The academy failed financially, and the property was purchased by Simon Gates, who made this his home. In 1947, the property was sold to St. Mary's Episcopal Church, who renamed the house Tarpley House, after Reverend Kenneth Tarpley, a former teacher and minister. Thousands of cobblestones were hauled by wagon from Lake Michigan to McHenry County to construct the John Walkup House, which is located across from Veteran Acres Park. These first three houses I've shown you have numerous things in common. They're all Greek Revival style architecture. They're all built in the 1850s. They all have cobblestone walls and/or foundations, and they were all built by local stonemason Andrew Jackson Simons. You gotta feel bad for Andrew Jackson Simons. The famous stonemason fought for the Union in the Civil War. Before he left for the war, Simons purchased bricks to build his house. But while he was away at battle, the bricks were stolen. Although there was a small portion of cobblestone on the east side of Simons's house, it seems ironic that this expert stonemason lived in a simple wood frame house. Another early architectural style found in Crystal Lake is the Gothic Revival style. The Pomeroy House on Pomeroy Avenue, of course, is a great example of Gothic Revival architecture. Gothic Revival elements include a steeply pitched roof, decorated verge board, window extends into gables, pointed window arches with Gothic detailing, and a one-story porch. Remember this famous painting called American Gothic? Anything look familiar now? Another Gothic revival is the Dr. Emery Ballou House, located at the corner of Center Street and North Caroline Street. Notice the steeply pitched roof with 3 forward-facing gables, decorated with intricate designs at the top. Each of the windows on this house possess a crown molding called a drip mold. Originally designed to protect windows from water running down the face of the building, this molding covers the top of the window and is peaked like a miniature roof to deflect water away from the window. A single-story porch running the width of the original structure can also be seen. It's interesting to note this house was moved to its current location. Another example of Gothic revival architecture is located at the end of Leonard Parkway down by the lake. Some have called this the Crow House, but to be more accurate, it is the Cadwell House, after the family who lived there for nearly half a century. Pictured here are Mary, Barzilla, and Polly Cadwell. Notice the Gothic revival elements of a steeply pitched roof and decorative verge board. Mary Cadwell became notable as the only woman in McHenry County to operate a horse-drawn taxi business. She would travel back and forth from the train depot to the Crystal Lake Resort area a dozen or so times a day, maintaining a very successful business until the advent of the motorized car. The property still sports a circular driveway, which was built so she could easily turn the buggy around. This beautiful and stately home was built by James Crow in the 1850s. Mr. Crow was a prominent and influential man in McHenry County. Not only was he an affluent farmer, but he was active within the community. Known for his farming experiments, it was noted that he had successfully grown bananas in Crystal Lake at one time. In the early 1890s, J. Harry Sells and his brother Emmanuel purchased 39 acres of land from the Crow estate. The Sells brothers owned and operated several shoe factories in the United States, including Chicago and Elgin. Ever hear of Shoe Factory Road? The house is a bit difficult to classify. We finally settled on Gothic revival because of its decorated verge board, Gothic-shaped dormer windows, drip molds above several front windows, and 4/4 windows in the single-story bay. It's hard to say how much alteration has occurred since it was first built, but it's easy to say that it's a beauty today. Another building style of the mid to late 1800s is Italianate. Typical elements of an Italianate building are 2 to 3 stories, a low-pitched roof with widely overhanging eaves having decorative brackets underneath, tall, narrow windows, commonly arched or curved. Windows are often grouped in pairs or triples. Windows frequently have elaborate crowns, and a square, cupola, or tower. Built during the Civil War by Charles S. Dole, the Dole Mansion is an excellent example of Italianate architecture. According to Mr. Dole's obituary, construction costs exceeded $100,000, an enormous amount of money in those days. The Dole Mansion is 3 stories high. Its widely overhanging eaves have decorative brackets underneath. Here we see the Dole's tall, narrow arched windows. The windows are grouped in pairs or triples. Italianate windows frequently had elaborate crowns. It's interesting to note that this window no longer exists. It was on the south side of the mansion, the side that is now attached to the Lakeside Center. Square cupola or tower? Well, the Dole Mansion has both. It should be noted the vintage photos of the Dole Mansion were taken in 1883. They were part of his daughter's wedding album, which was donated to the Crystal Lake Historical Society many years ago. Queen Anne style homes are found throughout Crystal Lake. Around the turn of last century, many of our local citizens had become successful businessmen and were able to afford such a dreamy home. Let's take a look at some of the Queen Anne homes in Crystal Lake. The Cowlin House, built in 1904 by William Cowlin. The house remained in the Cowlin family until 1986. These features are typical of the Queen Anne style. Steeply pitched irregular roof, patterned shingles, decorative detailing, cutaway bay window, asymmetrical facade, full width, one-story porch. Just up the street from the Cowlin House is the Hale House. Built by Alva and Mary Hale, this excellent example of Queen Anne architecture has been maintained with a few changes over the years. Queen Anne's characteristics of this particularly flamboyant home include a number of gables, hips, bays, and projections. Dressed up in clapboard and shingles, the house is festooned with patterns of diamonds and fans. Arched, oval, and tripartite windows are likewise embellished with lead and stained glass. Alvin Hale was prominent in the early history of our community. He owned and operated a grocery store, as well as a farm implement business. He was the Nunda Township supervisor for 26 years, school board member, as well as the president of the Union Cemetery Association of Crystal Lake. Another Queen Anne, this one at the corner of South Walkup Avenue and Paddock Street. The photo is a 1906 image of Mrs. Margaret Marshall Gracie's home, which she named Stony Brae. And here is Margaret Marshall Gracie. Together with her first husband, John, who was 30 years her senior, Margaret Marshall built this home. A short time after it was built, Mr. Marshall passed away. 2 years later, Margaret married her second husband, Royal Gracie, who was 16 years her junior. The home was passed down through generations and remained in the family for over 100 years. The home returned to the Gracie family several years ago by descendants with a love of local history and desire to keep the family home in the family. The fifth generation of the family now lives in this house. The house has been painted light yellow, and much of the details have been highlighted with accent colors. The current owners have undertaken some interior and exterior renovations. The original front porch was altered and enclosed years ago, but many of the other original Queen Anne details have been retained. The Ben Rao House was built and occupied by the Rao family for 93 years. The home's architecture is classified as Free Classic Queen Anne. Free Classic refers to the classical elements, such as the Doric porch columns and pediment-styled dormers. The Queen Anne features include the round corner tower, original variegated shingles, and a variety of dormers and windows. When Ben's daughter Lucille, the last of the Rao family members, passed away on Thanksgiving Day 1994, the Rao House was bequeathed to the historic downtown district of Crystal Lake and now serves as offices for that organization. This grainy photo was taken from a 1903 edition of the Nunda Herald. The house was built by Mrs. Emma Benthusen shortly after her divorce from her famous detective husband, Lafayette Benthusen. Detective Benthusen was known to have solved numerous difficult cases of murder, thievery, and other major crimes. Shortly after the house was built, Mrs. Benthusen sold it to Dr. Harry Hull. Longtime residents may remember when Dr. A.G. Lindbergh lived here. Both doctors lived here with their families and had medical offices on the first floor. As you can see, much of the original Queen Anne detailing has been removed, although some of it still remains. Let's take a moment to go back to our photo of the Cowlin house. Here's an excellent view of a fieldstone foundation. This type of stonework is prevalent among Queen Anne homes in Crystal Lake, but it's not just limited to that type of architecture. It's more of a timing phenomenon. The use of fieldstones as building material occurs in Crystal Lake from about 1890 to 1930. And this timing coincides with the heyday of a community within Crystal Lake known as Swedenborg. Many Swedish immigrants came to the United States during this era, and a large number of them were builders who settled their families in Crystal Lake. Those Swedish builders perfected the art of fieldstone foundations, and their handiwork is seen throughout our community. One such Swedish builder was Fred Kling. Many Swedish immigrants came to the United States during this era, and a large number of them were builders who settled their families in Crystal Lake. These Swedish builders perfected the art of fieldstone foundations, and their handiwork is seen throughout our community. One such builder was Fred Kling. Let's take a look at some of Fred's handiwork. Elmhurst is located at the corner of Crystal Lake Avenue and Elmhurst Street. This close-up side view of Elmhurst gives us a great look at the fieldstone handiwork of Fred Kling and his crew of Swedish builders. Just north of Elmhurst is this house called Stonehurst. The naming of houses is an interesting phenomena. Diana, maybe you should do some research on that topic. Franklin Cox is the original owner of both Elmhurst and Stonehurst. Mr. Cox built and sold many homes in our community. Although we were looking at their fieldstone handiwork, both Elmhurst and Stonehurst are best described as shingle-styled architecture. Here's another shingle-style home, which is located at the corner of Paddock Street and Walkup Avenue. Ernest Clark, its first owner, helped to develop this neighborhood of homes. By 1920, the house was owned by Walter Hoy Wilbur, who was president of the United States Bank of Crystal Lake. In 1931, the United States Bank was abruptly closed down by the state of Illinois. There had been a run of withdrawals, which resulted from rumors regarding Walter Hoy Wilbur's financial difficulties. These were the days before FDIC insurance, and many Crystal Lakers lost a lot of money because of this bank closure. But getting back to the architecture, let's find those shingle-style elements. Wall cladding and roofing of continuous wood shingles. Roofs usually have intersecting cross gables and multi-level eaves. Extensive porches. Asymmetrical facade with irregular, deeply pitched roof lines. Here are two beautiful shingle-style homes in Crystal Lake. Both of these homes are believed to have been built by our Swedish friend, Fred Kling. There are many similarities and a few differences. The Clark house on the left has a bit of a Queen Anne mixed in with its shingle style. Notice how the front pediment forms a triangle over a straight wall. The Cox house on the right has one flat front wall. The multi-angled roof on the Cox house is called a gambrel roof. Kind of reminds me of a barn. The first floor porches and foundations are also different. The Clark house is built on a foundation of formed concrete blocks. The blocks are also arranged in a piece designed to form the front porch railings. The Cox house foundation and first floor walls are made of fieldstone. Both houses have extensive porches, sit on a corner, and are architectural beauties. We've seen several houses built by our Swedish friend Fred Kling. So what house did Fred live in? Well, Fred actually lived in a SEARS KIT home. Fred built this home in 1916 as a wedding gift for his bride-to-be, Anna Karlstedt. The wedding was held in the living room. I'm happy to report that Fred and Anna lived here for the rest of their married life. Across the United States, there were a number of kit home manufacturers. The best known company is Sears. Sears, Roebuck and Company manufactured an estimated 75,000 kit homes between 1908 and 1940. The kits usually included assembly instructions, pre-cut lumber, windows, hardware, fixtures, and fasteners, all of which could total over 10,000 pieces. The lumber came from a mill in Cairo, Illinois. And the whole kit was delivered to town via rail. It was then moved in smaller bits to the construction site. What wasn't included in the kit price was the cost of the land, the foundation or basement, utility service, plaster, and most importantly, labor. The lure of do-it-yourself savings has always been a key selling point of kit homes. There are approximately 30 identified kit homes in Crystal Lake. Most of these are Sears kit homes. Let's take a look at a few of the Sears homes in Crystal Lake. Sears kit homes were known for their practical, economical designs and solid materials. The original cost of this home was $1,185. The home's first owner was Arthur Mickelson. Although some alterations have occurred, many of the original features of this home are still intact. There are 6 Sears homes on Glen Avenue. The Ardera model was offered from 1919 to 1929. The page on the left is taken from a reprint of the old Sears model home catalog. There are 3 Sears homes on Maple Street. This is a Hamilton model. Inside, the fireplace, doors, and woodwork are all original. The house was purchased by the current owner's grandmother almost 60 years ago and has remained in the family. It's interesting to note that the garage of this home is also a Sears kit. There are several Tudor-style houses in Crystal Lake, each of these unique and very beautiful. This Tudor-style house was built by Claude and Della Colby. Perhaps some of you remember Colby Motors. Let's find some Tudor-style elements. Steeply pitched roof, usually side-gabled. Facade dominated by one or more prominent cross gables, usually steeply pitched. Tall, narrow windows, usually in groups. Other Tudor characteristics include small tabs of cut stone projecting into the surrounding brickwork, round arched doorways with heavy board and batten doors. Still in the same neighborhood as the Colby house, the Branty house is also considered a Tudor. Unlike the Colby house, the Branty house has 2 other common Tudor-style features. Decorative half timbering elements at both the front and side gables, and a massive stonework chimney. The Arwen Bauer house on Dole Avenue is another example of a Tudor-style home in Crystal Lake. Notice the lower black and white photo, which shows a side view of the house. When we say steeply pitched roof, we really mean it. Notice the arched front doorway with its extra detail of cut stone projecting into the surrounding brickwork. Arwen Bauer and his brother Edwin co-founded the Bauer Oil Company in 1923. They built the first gasoline station in Crystal Lake at the corner of Brink and Grant Streets. Their father, Henry Bauer, had an automobile dealership on Woodstock Street. Spanish eclectic houses are most common in the southwestern states, but we have a few right here in Crystal Lake. Directly across the street from Fred Kling's Sears home is the Spanish eclectic style house, also built by Fred Kling. Once it was built, however, the buyer ran into financial difficulties, and so Fred was now the owner of 2 homes. He rented this one out and eventually sold it. The exterior walls of the house were constructed with 3 layers of a masonry material resembling fire brick and a clad stucco exterior. Fire brick, or refractory brick, is a block of ceramic material typically used in lining furniture, furnaces, kilns, fireboxes, and fireplaces. It's made to withstand high temperatures and usually has a low thermal conductivity, providing good energy efficiency. This house has most of the Spanish eclectic characteristics, including a low-pitched roof with little or no eave overhanging, prominent arch above door, stucco wall surface, and an asymmetrical facade. It's believed that Fred Kling also built this house. It's very similar to the last house we saw, but there is extra ornamentation. Perhaps the owners had a bit more money to spend on their new home. Daniel Gainey was a car salesman for the Cole Motor Company on Michigan Avenue. The Gaineys lived here for over 40 years. On a side note, a bit of history mystery. For many years, the Gaineys had a Hungarian-born maid living with them. In 1950, her body was found in the lake with a rock tied around her waist. However, no foul play was suspected. Colonial revival homes were most commonly built between 1880 and 1955. That's a pretty wide time frame, which brings us to several subtypes or variations. This colonial revival house is considered an Adams subtype. It's a simple box with doors and windows arranged in strict symmetry. It also features common elements of colonial revival. Accentuated front door, normally with a small porch crowning the entrance. Front door often has fan lights or side lights. Front door is usually centered and windows are symmetrically balanced. Windows are often double hung with multi-pane glazing. The house has a hipped roof with a low pitch and wide overhanging eaves. The windows have simple stone sills with flat brick lintels over the top, which is most widely seen in the northern states. One of the most distinguishing features is the front portico. Over the front door is an elliptical Palladian fan light window, and on either side are full-length side windows. Even the arch shape under the porch roof exactly matches the curve of the Palladian window. John White was a well-known butcher and grocer in Crystal Lake. The Whites sold their house to Paul and Lydia Rosenthal in 1933. Paul Rosenthal was best remembered as chairman of the board for Rosenthal Lumber. He was active in community affairs, helping to organize the Park District in 1921, and served as one of the original commissioners on the Park Board. The small entry porch on the Gallagher house has a simple pediment, and we notice the front door is not accented with a fan light or side lights. However, the facade of the house is symmetrical with its centered front door and evenly spaced double hung windows. The windows are rectangular with double sashes. In this case, there are 6 panels on the upper sash and 1 on the lower. Mr. Gallagher was an engineer for Nash Brothers Engineering. The firm did work for the Chicago Park Department, and under some arrangement, the wrought iron fence around the home was brought here from a park in Chicago. According to the Crystal Lake Herald, the house was built for $10,000 by Swenson and Sons Contractors, another Swedish family. There are multiple subtypes of the colonial revival architectural style. This house has a side gabled gambrel roof. It has a continuous dormer covering almost the entire span of the second floor. The front door has an elliptical fan light and narrow side lights. Notice how the break in the roof line over the entry beautifully follows the contour of the fan light. The other first floor windows are known as ribbon windows, as they were 3 or more contiguous windows placed side by side. The Dutch colonial style of architecture has evolved from its original look in both the Netherlands and the first Dutch settlements of the New World. Early pure visions are typically one-story, side-gabled with flared eaves. This is what you might call a Midwestern version of a Dutch colonial, with its prominent cross-gabled gambrel or dual-pitched roof. It's dressed down in a more rustic shingle style, referring to the front shingled facade. Although it may be dressed down, the fabulous fieldstone foundation sure does dress it up. Neoclassical style. Are you starting to feel like an expert? I am. This neoclassical house was built by Harold and Marie Tober. Mr. Tober owned a menswear store in downtown Crystal Lake. The Tobers brought in an architect from Williamsburg, Virginia, to design and build this classic. The home's dominant architectural characteristic is its full height entry porch with triangular gable that is supported by 4 columns with ornate Ionic capitals. Notice the symmetry of the center door, windows, and even the side wings of the house. These are all common elements of the neoclassical style. This beautiful home facing the Crystal Lake Country Club was built by Edward and Grace Bessie. Ed Bessie was the founder of Oak Industries, as well as Crystal Lake Duntile and Concrete Products Company. Both companies were founded in the 1920s. Ed and Grace Bessie were active in the community, donating to many, many worthy charities, but shying away from public recognition. On April 5th, 1948, Grace died suddenly from a massive stroke at her home. After her death, Edward withdrew from public life, and sadly, he ended his own life on December 20th, 1949. The house is built of duntile, produced locally in Mr. Bessie's own factory. In 1927, Ed Bessie had a vision to build a state-of-the-art factory in Crystal Lake. The factory would produce duntile and other concrete products used as building materials. The local duntile plant was located on the north side of Crystal Lake Avenue, just east of Main Street. The factory produced duntile until 1936, and then the building was later used by Mr. Bessie's other business, Oak Industries. Duntile was made by compressing sand, cement, and fine gravel. These materials were mixed and placed in a block container. A plunger was then forced through the block, creating an opening in the center. The blocks could be treated on one side with a liquid dressing, which would provide color and various levels of shine. Duntile blocks were typically larger than a standard brick, but light and easy to hold due to the hole in the middle. Duntile buildings were claimed to be energy efficient, fire safe, and vermin proof. Built in 1929, the Lorimer Mansion was constructed with white glazed duntile blocks. William Lorimer was the son of Senator William J. Lorimer. The senior Lorimer served in the House of Representatives for several terms. He was elected U.S. Senator in 1909, but was rejected by the Senate when the Senate adopted a resolution declaring, quote, that corrupt methods and practices were employed in his election and that the election therefore was invalid. Imagine that, a corrupt election from a Chicago politician. The Lorimer Mansion, often referred to as the White House, was the brainchild of Josephine Lorimer. While traveling in the South, she fell in love with the antebellum homes. Josephine worked with a local builder, W. Frank Robin, to create this breathtaking 5,000 plus square foot home. Unfortunately, the Depression took its toll. Business was bad in the 1930s and the bank foreclosed on the White House. The American Foursquare is technically a subtype of prairie style architecture. The Bertram House is an excellent example of an American Foursquare. It is square in shape, has a low-pitched hipped roof. The facade is symmetrical with a full-width single-story porch, and it is topped off with a hipped roof dormer. The house is made of formed concrete blocks. The blocks were manufactured by W.E. Dunn Manufacturing out of Chicago. That Paul Bertram would build a house made of concrete should be no surprise. Bertram was our city's first fire chief. He helped organize our city's building department, served as building and electrical inspector, was appointed one of the original zoning commissioners, and served as enforcing officer. Bertram also served for 16 years as the deputy state fire marshal. Two other prominent Crystal Lake families also lived in this house. Bert and Flora Colby purchased the house in 1920. Mr. Colby operated a mercantile store. His son, Raymond Colby, built the 1950 subdivision behind the Crystal Lake Plaza. Colby's subdivision was hardest hit by the 1965 Palm Sunday tornado. In 1954, Cecil and Mary Shaler purchased the home. Cecil Shaler was the owner and editor of the Crystal Lake Herald for many years. We're going to end this presentation with a beautiful American four-square home, which was built by Andrew and Anna Berlin in 1906. The Berlin home has some extra elaboration with its two-story bay window and second floor front porch. Once again, we see that beautiful Crystal Lake fieldstone foundation. Notice the picture of the two people on the front porch. I wonder how many hours were wild away sitting on the porch, greeting neighbors and watching our little town grow. This photo was taken in front of the Berlin house. It's a fond goodbye and wishes for good luck to two young World War I soldiers, William Chandler Peterson and Emil Berlin. Sadly, only Emil returned alive. How many weddings, birthdays, and funerals were hosted in the homes we've seen? How many hellos and goodbyes were said? How many meals were prepared and children were tucked in at night? As you travel down the streets of our city, take time to notice the houses, appreciate the architecture, and acknowledge the people who once lived there and helped build this city into a great place to live.